I have my guest ready to go. I mentioned his name briefly earlier, Jim Rawles, who has a website, survivalblog.com. He's also authored some survivalist science fiction books, and it seems like he's been trying to help people prepare for a economic collapse, food shortages, hyperinflation, and it seems that potentially this rather dire forecast for the future could be around the corner. So I figured I'd bring him on as a guest to talk a little bit about what he's doing. Jim, are you there?
Yes, I'm on. Thanks for having me.
Sure, thanks for coming on. So I have to admit, I haven't been on your blog yet, the survivalblog.com. What's going on there, and what kind of increase in traffic have you seen over the past year, or the survivalist business in general?
Well, I'd say the traffic is up about 30% for the year. I now have about 220,000 readers every week. Those are unique visits. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a strong interest in family preparedness. There's so many threats out there that it's just, prudent self-interest for people to go ahead and get food storage squared away, water filtration, communications, first aid gear, self-defense, the whole works.
Do you think are people more afraid of natural disasters or man-made disasters?
I'd say right now man-made, and the greatest concerns seem to be economic, and then some of the fallout from the economic things. As we're seeing in Egypt right now, it was government policies that led to rapid inflation in the price of food, and those food prices are what triggered all the riots that are going on.
Yeah, food today.
What's happening in Egypt and what may happen throughout the Islamic world.
Yeah, look at the price. The price of coffee is up at a record high here again today. I think coffee prices are up 70-80% in the last 8 months. Not a lot of commodities, but that seems to be an item that a lot of people might want to buy and store. If you could get that kind of return, why would you want to buy stocks and pay brokerage commissions when you can just buy yourself some coffee grounds and see that kind of appreciation?
Yeah, I recommend storing whole coffee beans and buying a coffee grinder. Mm-hmm. They actually can store quite a while if you buy green coffee beans, roast them yourself, and from what the serious coffee drinkers tell me, that's the best way to drink coffee anywhere.
Plus, and it's
like money in the bank.
If you want sugar with your coffee, sugar is at an all-time record high right now. Even if you don't drink coffee, you could barter it because somebody might want some. And if the price is going up the way it is, remember I mentioned before, there's no capital gains. If you buy some coffee grounds, and then a year later you grind them up and drink them, and they've doubled in value since you bought them, there's no income tax on that gain. Whereas, so it's a tax-free way to make money.
That's right. One of the things that I stress all through my writings, both my blog and my books, is the importance of stocking up tangibles that have a good shelf life. John Pugsley wrote a book years ago called The Alpha Strategy, which is now available online free, in which he outlines how to go about doing that. Everything from paper products, if you have the space, to things like coffee, canned goods. Some people store liquor. I'm not a drinker, but there's a number of things that people can stock up on in anticipation of future inflation.
Yeah, last time there was like a major kind of wave of people wanting to stock up and people fearful of runaway inflation and shortages was during the latter part of the 1970s. And I remember that because I remember my father coming to visit, my brother and I and my mom, and bringing us a machete, brought us a fishing rod. We were in Florida. He was trying to help prepare us to, go out and chop coconuts with a machete, and fish for. He was getting worried, and it was a very scary time back then. We didn't know how it was going to end, and of course Reagan and Volcker did the right thing, and the dollar was saved. They broke the back of commodities, and so that was a false alarm. Now maybe that was just a dress rehearsal. Maybe this is the real thing coming now.
I think you're right.
Or maybe it's another false alarm. We don't know.
What we've got here is the real deal, the genuine article. At this point, I think we're reaching a tipping point on the U.S. dollar. I think everyone's watching the U.S. dollar index very closely. And if confidence is lost in the dollar overseas, as you've pointed out, once you reach a psychological tipping point, we could see the dollar index, once it breaks down below 72, which seems to be the magic number, way down into the 50s, perhaps. We could.
Well, I think it's going lower than. I think it's going lower than that. I mean, I think it's going to 40 at a minimum, and maybe 20 or even lower. But the problem is, what saved us in 1980 was we were able to go off the gold standard, but which we did in 71. But we were able to revive confidence in our currency, even though it wasn't backed by gold, and we did that with very high interest rates, which we obviously can't do now because of all the leverage. And we were still the world's wealthiest creditor nation in 1980. We still had a current account, a surplus.
But now we're a debtor nation.
And the other thing that happened is that we were able to send our women, so to speak, into the workforce, because up until the 1970s, when women, by and large, married women, really didn't work. And so we were able to bring women into the workforce, and all that added labor in the workforce helped to prop up the economy. And so it was like we brought them off the bench and brought them into the workforce, and they were able to help produce and pay taxes and support the government. So it was women's labor and foreign capital. We got to a lot of foreign capital started flowing in to finance our lack of savings. So we had foreign capital, we had women entering the workforce. All of that bought us a lot of time. But, we don't have that anymore. The women are already working. I mean, we're not going to pull our kids out of elementary school and send them into factories. So, we're all tapped out on the labor. And we've borrowed so much money from the world, we can't borrow anymore. So, and we can't raise interest rates. So I think it really is the end game here.
I believe you're right. I think unless short of some amazing scientific breakthrough, like some American patents, cold fusion, that has huge gains or something, I don't see any way out of the current mess. Our government is so deep in debt that they don't dare raise interest rates too high because it would make servicing the national debt almost impossible, and that will cause a collapse just on its own.
Yeah. Meanwhile, so they lie about inflation.
We backed ourselves into a corner, and at this point, I'd still encourage people to be fully involved in the political process, do everything they can to get the government back on the straight and narrow. But at this point, we're down to just survival strategies.
Yeah, and meanwhile,
families.
The government is telling us that there's no inflation whatsoever. The inflation numbers are coming in the lowest they've been since the early 1950s. Meanwhile, I've never seen prices going up the way they are. It is totally Orwellian. And finally, on the Kudlow show last night, they were talking about some of the hedonic nonsense. I wrote a chapter about how the CPI is nonsense in my book, Crash Proof. But, I mean, there's so many things they do wrong. But not only do they pretend that quality is getting better and they count it as a price cut, but in many cases, quality is going down. And they never take a look at the reduction in quality and say that that's a price increase. I mean, let's say
they only look at the hedonic gains.
I know, but let's say a chair used to cost $100 and it was made in America. Now the chair costs $100, but it's imported from China. They'll say, okay, the price didn't go up, but now it's in pieces and it takes me 2 hours to assemble it. I mean, what's my time worth? Or they fire somebody and they get put on a voicemail system, and I call a company and I'm on the phone for a half an hour. I mean, that's a quality reduction. They didn't raise the price; they just reduced the quality. Or what about in an airline? You have to pay to check your luggage. You don't get any meals. You got to wait in an hour line, 2 hour line. Yet none of that considers a fare hike. Anyway, we're running out of time. I'll continue with this discussion after this commercial break.
The Peter Schiff Show.